Deep beneath a windswept cave in Siberia, archaeologists pulled a fragment of bone no bigger than a bottle cap. They thought it was nothing, maybe from a Neanderthal child, maybe just old debris. But when scientists sequenced the DNA, the world of human history cracked open. It wasn't Neanderthal. It was Homo sapiens. It was something else, something no textbook had predicted. A ghost branch in our family tree that might still live on inside us. If a species could exist for tens of thousands of years, spread across continents, breed with humans, and vanish without a trace, what else are we missing? You're walking through a cold, narrow cave deep in the Siberian mountains. The air smells of damp stone and ancient silence. Flickers of torchlight bounce off the walls, revealing rough carvings, bits of old bone, and piles of untouched sediment. It's 2008, and a team of Russian archaeologists is doing what they've done for years, cataloging fragments of prehistory, one rock at a time. They dig slowly, methodically. No one expects anything special. Denisova cave had already delivered Neanderthal remains. This was routine. But then someone brushes away a bit of earth and spots a sliver of bone. Tiny, barely the size of a coin. Maybe a piece of a pinky finger. Nothing about it stands out. They label it, bag it, store it. Just another artifact from a long-forgotten child, assumed to be Neanderthal. It should have ended there. But years later, when the fragment was sent to the Max Planck Institute in Germany, where scientists decode ancient DNA like detectives, the story took a turn. A big one. They ran the genome once. Then again. And again. The results were wrong, or so they thought. The genetic data didn't match anything they knew. It wasn't Neanderthal. It was Homo sapiens. What they had in front of them was something entirely different. A new kind of human. Not a cousin, not a mutation, a separate species altogether. This tiny bone, buried in darkness for tens of thousands of years, held the first evidence of a lineage no one even knew existed. And the creepiest part, it wasn't extinct in the way we thought. Because as scientists started checking modern DNA from people across the world, especially in Southeast Asia, Australia, and Tibet, something strange kept showing up. Denisovan DNA. In us. A prehistoric ghost species, whispering from inside our cells. At the Max Planck Institute, the team wasn't dealing with just another relic of the past. They were face to face with something unclassifiable. The genetic code extracted from that tiny finger didn't sit neatly on the human family tree. It branched somewhere else, close but unfamiliar, like a shadow in a family photo no one remembered taking. They called them Denisovans, after the cave where the discovery was made. But this wasn't a footnote in human evolution. This was a plot twist, because the DNA wasn't just new, it was influential. Denisovan genes still exist today, up to 5% in some modern populations, particularly in Melanesia, Aboriginal Australians, and certain Tibetan communities. That's not just a trace, that's a legacy. And it didn't happen by accident. For Denisovan DNA to still exist, it means they didn't just cross paths with Homo sapiens. They lived with us, had children with us, merged with us. But here, where it gets stranger, outside of that single finger bone, a jawbone in Tibet, and a few teeth, the Denisovans left almost no trace of their existence. No cities, no clear burial grounds, no cave paintings, no tools that can be undeniably linked to them. And yet, the DNA is everywhere. It's like finding fingerprints all over a crime scene, but no body, no motive, no witnesses. Just the unsettling feeling that something happened and you missed it. Even more chilling. Some Denisovan genes affect things we never understood until now: high-altitude breathing, disease resistance, maybe even cognitive traits. These weren't random leftovers. These were upgrades. What if they weren't less evolved than us? What if they were better at some things? That's the fear no one says out loud. Because if this forgotten species passed us gifts that helped us survive, then what else did they pass on? And what does it mean that they vanished while we remained? What if Homo sapiens didn't defeat them? What if we just became them? The Denisovans didn't leave behind a legacy carved in stone. They left whispers, genetic echoes embedded in our cells. And that's what makes this discovery so haunting. Because most ancient species leave a trail: tools, grave, artworks, ruined shelters, something. But for the Denisovans, almost nothing. A single finger bone. A large molar. A weathered jawbone discovered in the high-altitude Basia Karst cave in Tibet, 10,000 feet above sea level. Think about that. Denisovans weren't just surviving in brutal, oxygen-thin environments. They were thriving there before we even knew how. And that's not all. Some of their genetic traits, like the EPAS1 variant that helps with oxygen absorption, are so advanced, even modern athletes can't replicate their effects through training. These aren't random mutations. These are biological masterpieces, evolutionary hacks. So here's the big question. How could a species this resilient just disappear? Some believe we absorbed them slowly, generation after generation of quiet, intimate encounters. Others think we outcompeted them, that Homo sapiens simply pushed them out, either by sheer numbers or resource dominance. But maybe we never won. Maybe we just inherited their strength and forgot where it came from. Because their DNA still pulses inside people today. When someone breathes easily in thin air. When an immune system fends off a strange infection with unnatural strength. When your body does something it technically shouldn't be able to. You might be hearing their voice. Faint, ancestral, unacknowledged. And that brings us to something deeply unsettling. Denisovans didn't vanish. They vanished on the surface, but they're still in us. Which means we're not the sole survivors of prehistory. We're the continuation of something older, stranger, and maybe even superior. And the next time we look in the mirror, we might need to ask, what part of me isn't fully human? You've heard of ghosts in old houses, in dark forests, in forgotten towns. But what if the most chilling ghost of all is inside you? Because that's what scientists found, not in ruins or fossils, but in blood samples, in cheek swabs, in the human genome. It started when researchers began comparing DNA from the Denisovan finger bone with that of modern humans around the world. And the results. They weren't just surprising, they were unsettling. Some populations, especially in Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, Melanesia, and parts of Tibet, carried up to 5% Denisovan DNA. Not just a trace, not a fluke. A genetic legacy, quietly passed down for tens of thousands of years. This wasn't just history, this was personal. Imagine walking around with ancient, prehistoric genes stitched into your body. Genes that shape your biology, your immune system, your lung capacity, even how your brain works. It raises a creepy, unanswerable question. How much of you is actually someone else? Because the only way for Denisovan DNA to be inside modern humans is through interbreeding. We didn't just meet them. We lived with them, shared fires with them, had children with them. But here what makes it even more mysterious. The Denisovans left behind almost no culture, no cave art, no mythologies, no stories etched in stone. So we have this genetic ghost, a whole species that left more inside us than around us. They didn't build pyramids. They didn't carve gods into cliffs. But they shaped our blood. They were there. And now, in a way that feels more science fiction than science. They still are. And just like that, the lines between ancient and alive start to blur. Because if their genes shaped us, influenced us, maybe even protected us, did we truly survive them? Or did we become them? You know what scientists hate? Mystery. They like neat boxes, timelines, fossils lined up like a family photo album. But the Denisovans, they refuse to fit. These weren't just isolated mountain dwellers. Their genes are scattered across oceans and mountain ranges, showing up in Tibet, China, Australia, Indonesia, and beyond. It's as if this unknown species had spread across thousands of miles, and yet barely left a single stone tool behind. How? How did they reach the Himalayas, the tropical jungles, the remote Pacific islands, without ships, without maps, without the archaeological record to prove it? There's one word researchers use to describe this: admixture. It's a cold, clinical term, but it means something deeply human. We merged. We didn't just outcompete the Denisovans. We didn't just push them aside. We absorbed them. Through generations of interbreeding, their identity blurred into ours until they stopped being a separate species and became a hidden part of our own. But this raises a disturbing possibility. What if we've done this more than once? What if the human story isn't a simple tree with clean branches, but a tangled mess of roots and hybrids? Because scientists found something else. In a layer of ancient sediment in the Denisova cave, they uncovered the remains of a child. That child's DNA. Half Neanderthal, half Denisovan. A literal hybrid. A prehistoric child born from two species we once thought had never met. So now the question is, did we interbreed? It's how often? With who? And what does that make us? Because if species could merge this easily, if boundaries were that soft in the ancient world, then our entire concept of what it means to be human might be built on an illusion. And the scariest part, we wouldn't even know it. In 2019, high up on the Tibetan plateau, a jawbone was discovered inside a windswept cave called Basia Karst. It was massive, dense, worn by time, and unlike anything local. The monks who lived nearby had no idea how ancient it truly was, but scientists, they were stunned. Because when they tested the proteins locked inside its teeth, the truth hit like a thunderclap. This jawbone belonged to a Denisovan. Let that sink in. A Denisovan, not in a forest cave, but 10,000 feet above sea level, long before modern humans ever figured out how to survive that altitude. The Denisovans were not just present there, they were thriving, breathing thin air, navigating steep cliffs, building perhaps, living fully. And if that doesn't shake your idea of ancient humans here, where it gets eerie. Despite being genetically woven into millions of people, the Denisovans left behind no stories, no myths, no art, no songs or burials, just silence. Anthropologists now call it the Denisovan Gap, a black hole in the timeline where a species existed and spread, but left no cultural footprint. Where are their settlements? Where are their tools, their markers, their graph? The unsettling answer is, we don't know, but their DNA is still inside us. In the lungs of Sherpas, in the immune systems of Southeast Asians, in the oxygen processing power of people born to heights where others gasp for air. It's like we're walking around carrying a ghost, a shadow ancestor whose name we didn't know until very recently. And here's the terrifying part. If a species this widespread, this powerful, this successful, can vanish without a trace, what else have we missed? What if the next ghost is buried even deeper in our blood? What if one day science digs too far and finds something even more unfamiliar than Denisovans? Because the scariest question is, where did they go? It's, what if they never truly left? Forget what you imagine about ancient humans being frail, hunched, and barely surviving. Because the Denisovans, they were built differently. When scientists finally sequenced the genome from that tiny Siberian finger bone, what they found sent a chill down every evolutionary timeline. This wasn't just another archaic species, it was a biological anomaly. A blend of strength, adaptation, and raw survival, unlike anything we've mapped before. Their bones, massive not in a brutish caveman way, but in a refined, almost engineered way. Their jaws and teeth were larger, optimized for extreme conditions. No signs of deformity, no signs of weakness, just quiet, terrifying efficiency. And then there was the EPAS1 gene. That one mutation gave Denisovans an edge modern athletes would kill for. It allowed their blood to absorb oxygen at high altitudes better than any Homo sapien ever could. No panting, no acclimatization, no struggle, just instant performance in environments that would cripple others. And guess what? Modern Tibetans still carry that gene, a gift from their Denisovan ancestors. Think about that. You're looking at a prehistoric species that didn't just survive deadly altitudes, they dominated them. But here, where things twist again. For all this raw biological power, Denisovans left behind no art. No cave paintings. No ceremonial burials. No symbolic expressions we usually associate with intelligence. Does that mean they weren't smart? Or does it mean they were something else entirely? Maybe they didn't express ideas like we do. Maybe they didn't need to. Maybe their thinking wasn't external, no drawings, no storytelling, just pure embodied adaptation. Thought translated directly into behavior, memory into muscle, legacy into genes. What if they communicated differently? What if their intelligence didn't look like ours at all? The more we decode their DNA, the more we realize Denisovans weren't just strong survivors. They were an entire mode of humanity that operated by a logic we've barely begun to understand. And that mystery, it's still buried in us. Inside that same Siberian cave, Denisova, archaeologists found something completely unexpected. A bracelet. Not a crude circle of bones or string, not a child's toy, but a polished green stone bracelet made from chlorite that had been sourced from over 150 miles away. It was drilled with incredible precision, the kind of precision that requires a rotary tool 40,000 years ago. Wait, what? This discovery flipped assumptions on their heads, because Homo sapiens, supposedly the creative species, weren't even supposed to be in that region yet, which means Denisovans might have made it. A species we once thought of as primitive may have been crafting jewelry with technology we didn't believe existed until the Neolithic. It's not just about the bracelet. It's about what it represents. A kind of intelligence that doesn't match our patterns. We're used to mapping human progress through visible evidence, cave art, fire pits, symbolic burial grounds. If we don't find those things, we assume not intelligent. But what if Denisovans expressed their knowledge differently? What if they had technologies made of organic materials, wood, leather, bone, that have long since disappeared? What if they built in places we haven't looked, like deep mountains, or vanished coastal plains swallowed by the sea? Or what if they didn't build at all, not in the way we understand, because their version of intelligence didn't need tools? What if their genius was internal, a kind of biological programming to adapt, survive, and thrive? Modern science is finally admitting intelligence isn't one size fits all. And the Denisovans may have been the first proof of that. Not artists, not warriors, but something more quietly advanced. The bracelet sits in a museum now, behind glass, polished, silent, mysterious. A whisper from a vanished world, left behind by hands we'll never fully understand. And that whisper might just be the loudest thing Denisovans ever said. Let's talk about disappearance. Not a loud extinction, not a fiery collapse, but a quiet erasure. A fade into the shadows until only a few bones remain. That's the story of the Denisovans. They didn't build towering monuments or cities that crumbled into ruin. They didn't carve statues that could outlast millennia. They left behind something far stranger. No legacy except in us. Which raises a chilling question. If they were so successful, so biologically adapted, maybe even more advanced, why did they vanish? There are a few theories. Some believe they were simply absorbed, interbred with Homo sapiens until their distinct traits diluted over time. Their children became ours, their identity lost. Others point to climate. The Denisovans thrived in harsh, cold conditions. But as the Ice Age ended and ecosystems shifted, perhaps they couldn't adapt to the changing world fast enough. But there's a darker possibility, too. One that doesn't sit well. What if we erased them? Not deliberately, not even maliciously, but inevitably. Homo sapiens have a pattern. We expand, we replace, we dominate. It's not always war. Sometimes it's just numbers. Culture, language, children. So maybe, when we arrived in Asia, the Denisovans were already there. Watching from mountaintops, surviving in forests, hidden in caves. Maybe we didn't even see them as different at first. But generation by generation, we became more. And they became less. Until one day, they were gone. Not from the earth, but from the story. Except they're still here. In your lungs, helping you breathe at high altitudes. In your immune system, fighting off ancient viruses. In your cells, silent passengers from a forgotten world. They didn't leave monuments. They became them. Their story is now our story, buried in the DNA we carry like fossils in flesh. So the next time you wonder where humanity came from, remember, not all humans looked like us, and not all ghosts haunt the past. Some haunt the present. So what if everything we thought we knew about being human is incomplete? What if the line between us and them was never a line at all, but a tangled, messy web of encounters, whispers, and DNA handshakes? The Denisovans weren't a failed experiment. They were part of us, strange, brilliant, adaptable, and we carry their legacy in ways we're only beginning to understand. They didn't leave behind stories carved in stone, but they did leave behind traces in your breath, resilience in your blood, and maybe, just maybe, questions that science still isn't ready to answer. Because if they existed without us knowing for this long, who else did? And if their genes still live on, what else might be waking up? If this gave you chills, or made you look at your own reflection just a little differently, then you're exactly the kind of person we made this channel for. So go ahead, subscribe to Forgotten Fires. There are more mysteries buried in our past. And trust me, we've only just scratched the surface. Let's uncover them together.